So welcome everybody to the Ventures in Community November General Meeting. Our guest today is Karen Corbett Sanders, who is a member of the school board for, is it Mount Vernon District? Yes. And we're going to start first with a prayer by Keith Davey of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and then I will turn it over to Brenda Faison, the other co-facilitator of Ventures in Community for today's meeting. So Keith.
Thank you, Bill. Good to be with you. Let us pray. Oh God, our divine and beloved Creator, we gather today to discuss and learn and share experiences related to this very important topic. We are grateful to know that the glory of God is intelligence, and that whatever knowledge, wisdom, and intelligence we gain in this life will carry with us into the next life where we will be with you. We remember the poet Yeats, who says that education is not the filling of a pail, but rather a lighting of a fire. We know we all have personal, family, and community responsibilities to strengthen and bless the lives of the rising generation, and that through positive education and schooling experiences, they will be strengthened. We invoke thy blessings on the administrators, the teachers, the staff, all involved in teaching and educating these wonderful children and youth that we have throughout our area. And we pray thy blessings and help to us as we ensure that no person is left behind in opportunities to obtain education, wisdom, understanding, and intelligence. We also pray that you will help us as we adjust to the changing circumstances and modify and relieve the burdens of those that are so stressed by the situation with the virus and other events in our area. And we pray that we may go forward with confidence, united in purpose, and seeking at all times to bless and strengthen the lives of each one of the youth and children in our area. We're grateful today to have with us Karen with her wonderful record of care and concern and leadership in the school system, and pray your blessings to continue with her, to strengthen her and uplift her and all with whom she works. Now we invoke thy blessings and thy presence in our meeting here today, that we may be united, that we may work together, that we may advocate for our children and youth, and that we indeed may pull together in harmony and unity in this important matter in our community. We pray in thy holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. So Brenda, I'll turn it over to you to introduce Karen and to start things for today.
Thank you, Bill. It is good morning, everyone. It is always a pleasure to introduce good people, and it is especially a pleasure to introduce Karen this morning. It's been a while since I've seen you, Karen, but it's always good to see your smiling face with us. And for those of you who don't know, Karen is our Mount Vernon district representative on the school board, and she is a native of Fairfax County. She was born and raised here. She's a retired international business executive. And she also has, brings with her a love for the children that she's working with and for, because she was a past PTA president. But she's has one of the things that I think that stands out for me with Karen is she says that she wants to work to make sure that each school that she's over is a center of academic excellence. And I think that speaks in volumes for the type of work that Karen is doing for us each day and in the work that she does. Karen, as you know earlier, Bill stated that we have sent you questions that we were concerned about. And so you'll have about 20 minutes to respond to those questions or to anything else that you feel is important for the VIC members to hear. And then afterwards, we will ask you questions if there are some questions that still exist. So Karen, welcome. And I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Brenda, and I really appreciate your kind words. As somebody who was born and raised in this area, I actually went to all Mount Vernon schools. I went to the very first elementary school built as a desegregated elementary school in Fairfax County, which is the Quanda Road School. I then went on to go to Bryant, but Bryant was closed for a year. And so I ended up having the benefit of going and attending Walt Whitman when it was on the highway, which is where the original Mount Vernon High School is. And then graduated from where West Potomac is. It was actually the very first school in Fairfax County to have its name changed when they merged Fort Hunt High School, where I know Queenie is a proud alum, and Groveton High School, where I'm a proud alum. And so I purposely chose, when my family moved back from Europe, where I ran Verizon's offices for 10 years, I purposely chose to relocate to this area because it is home to me. And I also feel very strongly that I was given many blessings by graduating from Fairfax County Public Schools and graduating from schools in this area, because when I graduated from Groveton, it was the most diverse high school in Fairfax County. And so this is home for me, and it's personal because of my ties here. So I am very pleased to be able to attend this meeting. I have enjoyed attending VIC meetings for many years, especially some of you may not know this, but my undergraduate degree was actually in theology and philosophy. And I translated the Code of Canon Law from Latin into English as my very first job. So I have VIC has a special place in my heart. So the questions that were sent to me include pressures on school boards. And I would actually say that it's pressures on public schools. We are at a crossroads across this country. And that crossroads is about the role of public education and the importance of public education. From my perspective, public education is the great opportunity for access that cannot be realized any other way, because public schools accept and focus on the needs of every child who comes to our doors. We do not get to choose who comes to our doors. Our job is to embrace them and to ensure that they have access to a full range of opportunities. And so many of you will know that I often use the term the FCPS promise. And the FCPS promise is one in which every child should be welcomed and should be known by name and by need. That every child, regardless of what high school they go to, should be able to have access to a full range of academic programs that go from some students who come to us with interrupted education, and so therefore need more of a, and I hate to use the term remedial, but more of a bridge program to provide them the educational opportunities. And other students need to have their advanced academic needs met. And so here in Mount Vernon, what we've done is we've really focused on ensuring that we have Northern Virginia Community College coming to our area. Mount Vernon High School is the very first high school in Fairfax County to have a dual enrollment program that allows students to graduate with significant college credits. And unlike the advanced placement or IB credits, These are guaranteed college credits because they are coming from a community college. And soon we will have Northern Virginia Community College resident at the original Mount Vernon High School. We also have to address the very real needs of students who come to us from homes that may not have access to early childhood education needs. And that is why I've focused on making sure that at the original Mount Vernon High School, we will have about over 200 pre-K spots coming to that school when it's fully renovated. That makes a huge game changer for our area, because although the state code actually has a K through 12 mandate for public schools, we know that unless we address that pre-K piece, we have kids that come to us without numeracy and phonemic awareness skills that are so necessary to ensure that they have literacy have the literacy necessary to succeed by 8. They say success by 8, that you need to have that fluency by the time you're 8 years old, or your chances of success actually decrease. So we need to have that early infusion. We also have to have, public education moved away from phonics and structured literacy for about the past 20 years. And what we've found is that that has not been as successful. And so we are reintroducing that structured literacy programming. And that started over the summer, where we had some robust professional development for our teachers, and it will continue going forward. So it's really laying the groundwork. The other piece of it is the mathematical literacy, the numerical literacy, and that's an area which I will be introducing as part of our legislative package next week, or actually the 22nd we'll be adopting it, is having more focus on having a math resource teacher in all of our schools. I see Kathy on the line. Kathy knows I've been advocating for this for years. It is just critical that we address literacy both from a numeric literacy as well as from a reading literacy. You have to have both. We also are looking at trying to create additional access to opportunities, and many of you will know that we made substantial changes to our admissions policy for Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology, and those changes were really driven because what we saw is certain areas of the county were not well represented at that school. And so the new approach looks at what they call local norming, and ensuring that if you are in the top 1.5% of your middle school class, you will have the opportunity to apply to TJ and be seriously considered. Looking at that is so important, because what we know is that there are some kids who are passionate about math and science, and we want to make sure that no matter where you live in this county, you have access to those opportunities. I'm cognizant of time, so I'm going to go to some of the other questions. Your next one is calendars. So this is an interesting issue, and I hope that everybody has received our calendar survey for this year. It is substantially changed from prior years, because in the past we would have these calendar surveys put out and there was no connection of the survey to the statutory requirements. So for example, we have a statutory requirement to have our students in school 180 days. we have a statutory requirement to adopt a calendar which is based on secular needs of the school system. We cannot identify specific religions as a reason for taking off taking days off. So what we can do is look at the operational impact and make decisions based on that as to whether or not we have to make changes to our calendar going forward. So last year, excuse me, what we did is we introduced we did two things. One is prior years, we had a policy that allowed professionals in our schools to take 2 days off a year for religious reasons. Those 2 days were allowed individual professionals in our schools to say, these are 2 days I need to take off because of my religious beliefs or observances. The challenge with that was the regulation required those professionals to not only identify their religious observance, but more importantly, they had to find a substitute. And if they didn't find a substitute, they were not able to observe their religion. What we did is we changed that policy to enforce that every employee has 2 floating holidays for religious observance. This is consistent with how corporations and the government typically works with religious observances. The second piece of it was that you could not only take those days off, but you would not be required to go through the legwork of finding a substitute. It was a guarantee that you could do so. Third piece was that we also gave to our students the ability to take 2 days off for religious observances. But at the same time, knowing that if we didn't do this with some other areas built into our calendar, those students would be reluctant to take those days off because they would be concerned that they would miss valuable teaching time. So we actually built into the calendar for religious observances. We identified all the days that we know are observed by the pluralistic society in which we live, because we have many faiths and many different days that are higher priority for some than others. And so what we did is we identified them as observance days and instructed our staff that they could not do testing on those days or have field trips on those days or have special events on those days. So ensuring that for those students who were observant, that they would not miss out on important educational experiences. And instead on those days, we have instructed our staff to ensure that there are opportunities for students to make up work or to review materials, but not have any new materials covered. So your next question, hold on a second, is regarding overcrowding. So believe it or not, our overcrowding has become less of an issue in many of our schools because in the post-COVID environment, we know that many families are waiting to send their students back to school until there is a vaccine or they have more confidence. And so we have a lot more families who are choosing to homeschool this year. And so we went from a projected 188,000 students, and we're now at 180,000. Having said that, we also know here on the Route 1 corridor that we have significant growth already happening and coming forward. With Embark Richmond Highway, there's an estimated 12,000 students who are likely to be coming to the Route 1 corridor. as a result of already approved residential housing. We know that this is already starting with the opening of North Hill this summer. We know that we have growth along the Huntington corridor. We have growth essentially from the border of Alexandria City and going all the way down to Fort Belvoir at this point. And that's where the biggest growth areas are coming. And so I'm confident that we have the capacity in our schools to address that growth. I will say that it was interesting because this year, the school that grew was Mount Vernon High School. The school that shrunk was West Potomac High School. So it is an interesting dynamic that we continue to work with. And it's one of those really challenging pieces because we know that the birth decay ratio in, birth rates have been down. There was no increase in birth rates as a result of the pandemic. And we know that the birth decay ratio which means that you're born in Fairfax County and you start in kindergarten in Fairfax County, is relatively flat. So we will see as we continue to come out of this pandemic, what the impact will be on our schools. Let's see, search for a superintendent. Search for a superintendent, as many of you may know, we just hired GR Consulting to work with the school board in our search for a new superintendent. That GR has a long history of working with jurisdictions across the country. They have placed the superintendent at the largest school system in the country, or the second largest, being Clark County, which is Las Vegas. They've placed the school superintendent in Dallas. They've also placed the superintendent in a couple of superintendents in Florida. So they have a long history of this. What's interesting about their approach is that they are using surveys in multiple languages to reach out to the community once we start that process. They also have committed to having town halls throughout the county, which is something that many of us have seen in prior searches. And they're very focused on ensuring that we have a robust community engagement. So I am confident that VIC will be reached out to as we move forward on that. And let me see what your next question is. So this next question is, in my mind, the most important question of the day, and that is support for students falling behind due to the pandemic disruption. First off, I would like to say they're not, I worry about using the term falling behind rather than having delayed learning. Because if you use the term falling behind, it is actually a more of a negative. And we don't want our students to have a perception of them being academically behind, but rather that we have to focus, have a laser focus on ensuring that our students have the opportunity to acquire those skills that they may not have acquired because of the virtual learning experience over the past 18 months. And that means that, first identifying where they're at. And I will tell you, this is one of the hardest things that I have had to deal with because we had made significant headway into addressing learning gaps, especially here in Mount Vernon. But the pandemic had significant impact on those learning gaps widening again. And I will say that even in jurisdictions that were open for face-to-face learning, those gaps widened. It is a national challenge. Here in Mount Vernon, I believe that in many ways, the skills of our Title I teachers are so innovative and focused that I think that we will regain those challenges. But what we're seeing is not only the academic delays, but the behavioral delays or behavioral challenges for kids who have not engaged socially with face-to-face engagement for too long, are having to relearn skills to be able to be part of our school system. But we're also finding that, especially for our little ones, they're coming into school without having those basic skills because some of them weren't, they weren't in a pre-K program, they weren't in a kindergarten program. Now they're in first grade to third grade. And we're teaching basics like, how do you walk in a hallway? How do you engage respectfully with your classmates? How do you, develop friendships? These are skills that children typically learn over time in our classrooms, and we're really having to do quite a bit of catch up there. And that social emotional piece is a big part of it. And it's not only a challenge for our students. We know that our adults are feeling the stress of re-entering our community in ways that we have to be grace-filled, for want of a better term. We have to understand that everybody experienced the pandemic in different ways, and based on the different way they experienced it, we have to find ways of reaching out and embracing everybody and giving them the skills and the supports that they need. I'll tell you, one of the things in speaking to students was interesting. They feel like they don't have the stamina that they used to have. In speaking to adults, many of my adult friends say the same thing, that they don't have the physical stamina they used to have. And so this is something that we all have to work together to address and to provide those skills, but also provide the grace to understand that people are coming at this with different experiences. Let me see what else is on your questions. And one of the things with addressing the learning delays is that we are really focusing on a growth mindset of measuring where our students are at the beginning of the year, measuring where they are at the middle of the year and where they are at the end of the year, so that we see a bit more of, how fast kids are growing, where there are areas where they may be stagnating or be need a little bit of a booster shot, and then continuing on. But the other piece is our students with disabilities. They are a particular concern for me because of the learning challenges, the social emotional challenges, and the fact that our students typically age out of our system at 22 years old. And what you will see is we're going to be asking from the state to give us at least one more year for these students to be able to get the supports they need to be able to. And those supports are typically provided through our STEP program, which is very robust at Mount Vernon High School, as well as the Pulley Center here in the Mount Vernon area. And we just need to ensure that people understand this is not just because we're all back in school doesn't mean that all of these concerns or issues are magically resolved. Homeless students. Some of you have heard me speak about this. We have a gaping hole in how we deal with homelessness in Fairfax County and frankly in the state. And the gaping hole is, if you're homeless and part of a family structure, you can go into a family homeless shelter. If you're an adult and you're homeless, you get to go to an adult homeless shelter. We have students who are in their middle teens who are homeless, and we do not have a space for them. This is not an issue for the schools technically, but it's an issue because there are children, and we need to find a way of addressing these needs. And so I have been working with the superintendent or the supervisor to say, we need to address these. We need to be laser focused. I did ask whether or not we could have a number of beds in the new homeless shelter on Beacon Hill. I don't know if they've finally decided on that location, but I think they have. I'm going to just say that homeless shelter.
Not yet.
And, okay, not yet. Well, the replacement of the Kennedy shelter. So and I was told we can't because of the regulations that don't allow the mixing of our kids. So one of the things that I have suggested, and I'm still noodling through and working on it, is that maybe we can look at some of the capacity in some of our underutilized buildings and have a place for our kids. Because we can't leave these kids behind. And it's not, if we don't have a place for them, then my concern is that they will be taken advantage of. And we know, and for those of you who don't know, some of my early work on the school board was ensuring that we had a more expansive human trafficking curriculum, so people know what the risks are of human trafficking. And that we've actually built that into our health curriculum, as well as bystander awareness, so that if we see something happening, that if somebody sees something happening, they are given the skills to know how to intercede or get help, so that our children are not put in a bad situation or taken advantage of. So that is a major area of concern, and it's something that I hope VIC is equally concerned about. Similarly, we talked about a little bit about social emotional well-being. Do you realize there are only 6 pediatric psych beds? Our children who are having a crisis, if they are not associated with the military base, and so therefore can't access that, there are a handful of beds at Inova. There are just very few, and they have to go either down to Prince William County, and some of our kids are going as far as Richmond to get the supports. And so we do need more supports for our homeless kids, and we need more supports for our students who are in crisis. Not listed here, but I think important, is also the national crises we have on teachers. Some of you may know I'm actually on the board of Boston University's School of Education and Human Development. They are, over the past decade, they've seen across the country a decrease in the number of people who are graduating from school and going into the teaching profession. We don't really know the full reason for it. Some will say it's because of the economics of becoming a teacher. The reality is, in Fairfax County, we have invested in competitive wages for our teachers. But if you look at the state as a whole, it falls in the last, in the lower 10 for pay of teachers. But I think it's more than that. I think it is that we have not focused on ensuring people understand and value the incredibly important role teachers have in our society. You know, many of you who know me know that whenever I see a police officer, I thank them for their service. When I see a person in military, I thank them for their service. We have done a pretty good job of thanking and honoring our first responders. But I would argue that our first responders in life are our educators. And we need to reinvigorate and change the dialogue about education as a profession, and lift it up to honor the incredibly important role that educators have in our society. Because if we don't, then we are going to continue to face challenges. We're going to see that we will have to increase the size of our classes because we won't have enough educators. And so we need to change the national dialogue to one that says there is no more important first responder role than the person who takes on that role as an educator, starting as early as pre-K and going through high school. So with that, happy to take questions.
We're going to invite you, if you have questions, to raise your hand, or at least raise your hand in the virtual chat so that we can see you. I think I don't see a question right now, Karen, but I would like to ask as we wait, in lieu to the last statement you were talking about with investing in teachers. And I think that is a phenomenal piece, and we do need to change the dialogue as to how we treat teachers and how we see them. What are you doing as far as recruiting African-American teachers specifically and other minority teachers? How are you doing? How are we doing with that?
So thank you, Brenda. That's a great question. Starting about 4 years ago, we began a very robust recruiting strategy that included visiting all of the HBCUs and the newly formed, or those colleges that are focused on the Latino Hispanic community. And we've been working really hard to attract experienced educators or talented educators that are from underrepresented communities. I will tell you, as somebody who had 2 Black teachers while I was in elementary school out of 6 grades, because back then we didn't have kindergarten, had multiple Black teachers in middle school, and a Black principal at my high school. It is, and that was here in Mount Vernon area. It is frustrating to me to see that we're facing the challenges we are. And part of it is competitiveness with other industries, that people are choosing not to go into education. So it goes back to this whole concern about the national dialogue on educators. The second piece of it is that we have to become more nimble in how we do our recruiting. So going to the HBCUs and the Latin focused colleges is one piece of it. But the other piece is that we have started hiring people starting in January. Up until 4 years ago, we didn't hire people in January. We hired people in July because that's our fiscal year. The problem with hiring people in July is they've already taken jobs elsewhere. The second piece of it is that we are working hard to grow our own through two initiatives. One is through our Teach for Tomorrow programs at each of our high schools, where we encourage students to get experience working with teachers, and we do signing bonuses or signing programs, kind of like, you know, all these sports kids have a big signing ceremony. We're now doing signing ceremonies when kids say, I want to become an educator. The third piece is that we are working with our very talented IAs and some of our, what they call para support professionals, and getting them to consider going into teaching and providing funding for them to take courses to become teachers. So that's kind of where we're at on the recruitment side. Now there's the retention side. And that's critical. And the critical piece is a couple pieces, because at the leadership level, we do have significant representation of Blacks. We haven't done as well in representation of Hispanics, and Asians we've done less with. So we need to be more intentional on showing that there is a career progression and an opportunity. But the other piece of it is the retention piece. And what we know is that, and I don't know if you've ever followed Mr. Bristol, who is a PhD in education who's focused on the retention piece. Used to be at Boston U, he's now at Harvard. But his big thing is, he says, you know, we've done a lot of analysis, and the analysis is that to retain good people, you have to have a cohort within the building. Yeah. And for too often, we've had schools where there's just a single practitioner. Yeah. And people feel lonely. They don't, especially males, because the other piece of it is, for too long, building administrators have given the role of discipline to a Black male teacher. And I don't know a single teacher who went into the profession of teaching to be a disciplinarian. And so that's another piece that we have to work on. And then I will tell you, when I first came on the board, something I did, which was probably a little unorthodox, is I looked at the staff at each one of our schools and identified those schools that did not have a representative staff. And I actually raised my concerns with the superintendent. And I am pleased to say that we have much more representation today in our schools than we had when I first came on the board. And I'm encouraged that we are continuing to expand it, at least here in Mount Vernon, where I have some say.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Karen. I see Bill has his hand, and there is a question that we'll take after Bill from Keith Davey.
Okay, and then we also have Ann Hargrove.
Ann Hargrove is raising her hand physically in front of the camera.
Okay, Ann, I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
Yeah, Karen, I have way too many questions, so I'll try to focus on one, okay? And this is a worry I have, and it was present in this most recent political campaign, and that is, I am a trained librarian. I have a friend who works in a high school library in Fairfax County. And I have watched, and I can only call it this, hysteria based on misinformation and falsehoods about certain books and about certain topics that lead people to flood school board meetings to demand that certain books be removed. And I did an experiment recently on the list that a legislator in Texas sent around to all of the schools in Texas, 800 books. And I started looking at them on Amazon. And I looked at the ratings, and hundreds, if not thousands of people are going in to give them 1-star ratings based on what they heard said about them, okay? And most of these books I have read, and they are not at all what they are represented to be. Now, you can understand as a librarian, I'm on a soapbox here, and I feel pretty strongly about this. How is the school board here facing the demands for books to be removed about race, about LGBTQ, and just anything that somebody thinks, or by a Nobel Prize and Pulitzer Prize laureate who happens to have passages that are hard? How is the board facing that, considering what we've just seen in Loudoun County and other places nearby? Because I'm really concerned about that this is going to become a movement to try to push school boards to remove books that represent students who don't have a voice. So I'm sorry, turn that over to you.
So Bill, that's a great question. And it's not only in our libraries, it's in our curriculum. And it's not limited to Loudoun County or the state of Virginia. It's happening across the country. As somebody who read The Outsiders when I was in high school, actually middle school, that was a pretty violent book. So I would say that there's a fundamental difference today than there was years ago, in that Fairfax County allows two things. One, if it's in a curriculum, if a parent has a concern about a book in a curriculum, they can ask for the book to be reviewed. And we have a review committee, which is appointed by both school board members and the superintendent, who look at the content to determine if it's appropriate, age appropriate, and also whether or not we have books that allow all of our students to see themselves, because that's important. To become passionate about reading, you need to be able to see yourself in what you're reading. And so while I've been on the school board, there have been a number of books that have been challenged and have gone through this review committee for curriculum. The other piece is that if you aren't happy with the book that your child is assigned because you may have concerns about it, you have the ability to say, I don't want my child reading that. And Fairfax County has a policy that will give the child another book of similar reading strength to actually read that book and participate in the lessons of that chapter or whatever the current curriculum is, so that parents do have, here in Fairfax County, parents have an incredible voice in allowing them to make those decisions for their child. Similar with our family life education, you can opt out individual chapters or the whole program. In the library, we have a similar review process, but it goes through a library review process. And I'll tell you, there are times where a book may be considered appropriate for one age group and not for another, or it may be considered not appropriate at all. And so the process works. And about a month ago, we had people come to the school board, and they had blown up posters about, truly the size of a poster, that they identified passages from two books that they were concerned about. And because of what was portrayed on the posters, those two books were sent to this review committee. Frankly, if somebody had reached out and said, I have a concern about these books, we would have used the exact same process, because it's a process that allows for the review and for discerning members of these committees to make recommendations on it.
Thank you, Karen. Bill, are you set? You're good?
Yeah, I have a dozen other questions, but other people should ask
All
questions.
right. All
And
right.
you can always call me, Bill, with your questions too.
Let's go to Keith, and then we'll come back and get Ann. In the chat, Keith has a question. Are high school students more or less inclined to pursue careers in education as teachers than one previously, and two needed for the future?
Karen, I think you answered that earlier.
Yeah.
And so is there anything that we as a community could do to encourage more high school students to pursue opportunities and careers in education? Are there anything that you think we could do to encourage more?
I think the most important role of our, especially as our faith-based community, is to reinforce the important role our educators have in our society and actually lift them up for the heroes that they are.
Karen, I may be out of order to make this recommendation, but we happen to have Mary Futrell as a member of Bethlehem Baptist Church, who was the first African-American president of the Teachers Association. She might be someone that you could persuade to be able to talk to young people and encourage them into the field of education. She's retired now.
If you want to make that introduction, I would love it, Brenda. Would be happy to have coffee with the two of you and brainstorm on how we can do it. But it is so important.
Yeah.
Each one of us knows that having a valued professional in a building is a game changer for every one of our students. We know that if a child has one person in the school building that they have confidence in and feel like that person is supporting them, their likelihood of success long term, it goes up exponentially. And so it's our job to lift these students up. It's our job to encourage our students that there is a bright future out there. I mean, I am very, very concerned about the rhetoric. We need to be much more focused on what are the opportunities for our children and how valued they are to be game changers for the future. And, you know, I'll tell you, the only reason I do this job is because I believe in the power of our kids. And I will do everything in my power to encourage our kids to be able to succeed and to get the skills they need, either to pursue post-secondary education in a college environment, or to have workforce development skills. Many of you know that I've been very focused on ensuring that we have robust career and technical education programs for our kids.
Thank you. Ann, do you want to ask your question now?
Yes. Hi. The outreach committee at St. Luke's Church is particularly interested in homeless students, and we do have a relationship with the county's Office of Homelessness. But I was wondering if, from your viewpoint, faith communities can do something to really help homeless students. For example, could a special scholarship be designed that would have that would have housing support in it, or something like that. I was wondering if anything like that has ever been discussed by the school board.
So as I mentioned, Ann, the school board, I actually brought to the school board the student homelessness issue. And so we are starting to have those conversations. But I actually think that it's really important to talk about, I mean, there are a few homeless beds over on the western side of the county that some of our kids are accessing, but there aren't enough. It is a national issue, but here we know it's a big issue as well. And what we need to look at is, what are ways that we can meet their needs? I know that some of the faith-based community has looked at affordable housing for seniors. Maybe we need to look at the availability of homeless housing for our teens. Or maybe we actually need to look at intergenerational supports, because one of the things that we know is that we have students who need adults in their lives, and we have seniors who need young people in their lives. So maybe we need to think of outside the box and find ways of addressing these needs more collectively. And I would love to continue the conversation about this, Anne, because it is an area that I do worry about a lot. We know, especially, we have large dropout rates amongst kids that are homeless. And we know that it's becoming more and more of a challenge to find affordable housing in our community.
I was going to ask you, Karen, based on that, what are the resources that the school counselors have right now to deal when they come across with a student that is homeless? What they can do, basically? That is my question. I mean, what resources do they have?
So we have food pantries in many of our schools. We are now providing free breakfast and lunch. So we're dealing with the food insecurity piece, but we know actually that housing first mindset works. And so we have to address the housing insecurity piece. And this is the piece that schools technically don't have a role, but our social workers and our school counselors, and we have put more investment in social workers and school counselors, and with the help of the county, we are going to now have a school nurse in every school, an actual RN. And by having those supports there, that team can triage the needs of each individual kid.
Thank you.
And that means finding housing where they can find it. It's actually really interesting, and I don't know enough about this. I need to look into it a bit more. But even our foster care program in Fairfax County,
I was going to mention that, yes.
It's actually woefully small. We have an incredibly small foster care program compared to the size of our county, which in my mind, and in speaking to people, seems to indicate that there is probably a larger homeless youth problem, because they're not going into foster care. Because there's not something that makes us in Fairfax County, which is an urban county, uniquely different than other areas. The uniqueness is the role in places like Mount Vernon, where the community leans in and tries to supplement what the county does.
Okay, I think Kathy has her hand up as well with a question. Thank you, Karen.
Kathy, you're muted.
Yeah, your sound isn't coming through, Kathy. Not sure why.
Can you type it in the chat?
Yep. while Kathy's, oh, there she is. Okay.
Okay. She says she wants to piggyback on Karen's comment of getting involved. We're looking for adult volunteers in some of our schools now, and she's given us, I'm gonna see some more here. Oh, yeah, and adult volunteers in her schools now, right now.
Kathy, can you put in the Grand Involved link?
And Edgar Gonzalez also put something in, if you're all
Mhm.
knowing. If
Yeah.
housing insecurity, connect them with legal services in Northern Virginia.
He
And
says,
we do have at each of our schools for our counselors and social workers, a list of different resources. And I know that they're on the list. But
okay.
one of the challenges, just so you know, is the concern that some children just don't want anybody to know. And so they're sleeping in their cars. You know, the previous principal at Hayfield used to do something amazing, which is he would go in at 5 a.m. and open the doors to the locker rooms so that kids could come in and shower. And nobody would know that they were homeless. And they would come in and they would get ready for the day. And then because of the food services being provided, they would be able to have a warm meal. And, you know, I know that many of our schools do provide those type of supports, but it's still, we as a community need to recognize that this is a concern and an issue and have to provide those supports.
Okay. Thank you. It looks like, Karen, I don't see any more questions, comments. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. It looks like your plate is really well filled with a lot to do. But we will certainly keep you in our prayers and everyone in the school board as things continue to not seem to get calmer, but more stressful. So know that we are praying for you.
Well,
Bill,
Thanks, Brenda. No, I just
Sure.
want to say, Karen said that I could call her anytime to talk about my questions. And that's an open invitation that if people have questions, they want to talk to you about them, that they can arrange a time to talk to you.
what I'm going to do is put in my telephone number, which is a cellular, so that people can send me a text or call me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I will also put in my email address. And those that know me know that I try to get back to people as quickly as possible.
712797923. I'm glad to have your cell phone now.
I will offer one thing. Brenda, I very much appreciate your prayers and I accept everybody's prayers. But please pray for our kids.
Yeah.
And for our staff.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, they're why we're here.
Yeah.
And they deserve our prayers and our support in any way we can. So thank you.
You know, I feel moved at the moment to just share in close a Baha'i prayer for youth, part of a Baha'i prayer for youth, because it actually says something about the expectations for their future. And so this is praying for them, okay? O Lord, strengthen these fragile seedlings, that each one may become a fruitful tree, verdant and flourishing. Render these souls victorious through the potency of thy celestial hosts, that they may be able to crush the forces of error and ignorance, and to unfurl the standard of fellowship and guidance amidst the people. that they may, even as the reviving breaths of the spring, refresh and quicken the trees of human souls, and like unto vernal showers, make the meads of that region green and fertile. Thou art the mighty and the powerful, thou art the bestower and the all-loving. So there we go. To crush the forces of ignorance and to bring about verdant and united garden of humanity. So let's pray for that. Karen, thank you so much for your work and for being here. Thank you, Brenda, for facilitating. Thank everybody who's here and for the questions. And you've got her phone number now. So, okay, Karen, thank you so much. And we'll see you all next month on December 1st. And that's going to be, we're gonna be a slightly different time. We're gonna start at noon. And we're going to have an opportunity for announcements and conversation among the organizations and people present at that meeting. And then at 12:30, Rodney Lusk and Chief Davis are going to join us. And we're going to talk about public safety and also about the Audubon Community Center and the Workforce Development Center that Mr. Lusk has been working so hard on. So hopefully we'll have a really good meeting there, but that one may go an hour and a half. So be prepared. Okay, thanks everybody. See you next time.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a
Thank
good
you,
day.
Karen.